Rosenberg. I'm just going to start off by giving you a little bit of kind of background on Rosenberg and his writing of poems. So he was a Brit, and he fought in World War One. And during his experiences in World War One, he wrote several poems at the different units he was with. He was only 5'3", so he wasn't allowed to go like really fight. So they put him in this battalion of just guys who were under 5'4". So they called it the Phantom Battalion or whatever. So it's a bunch of short guys fighting in the front lines. And so he wrote a poem kind of before the war about how he was struggling to decide whether or not he should even do it at all because he was opposed to the war. But then he ended up coming to this conclusion that the more people you have fighting the war, the quicker you can end it and the quicker you can get back to peace. So that's why he ended up enlisting. So he went to the front lines with that Phantom Battalion, and then after he wrote several poems at that point, but he became very sick, and so he tried to get a clerical job back in Britain. But that didn't work, so they put him in the 40th Works Division, which is where this specific poem, Dead Man's Dump, comes from. It's when he was ferrying supplies from the rear up to the front lines and just doing that every day with these mule-drawn carriages. And specifically, he brought a ton of barbed wire up to the front lines, which was very instrumental throughout the war. He ended up dying pretty much just a couple months before the end of the war. There was a massive German assault on his line, and he got killed. So, kind of tragic there. So, just to go over World War I. World War I saw some of the biggest jumps in weapon advancement. So you had the water-cooled machine gun, which was able to just put out tons of rounds, killing many people. You had the rise of modern artillery, which is also able to do the same. And then I brought in barbed wire because it doesn't seem like it's this huge weapon or anything, but it helped cause millions of deaths. So those are just kind of the weapons, and then the strategy is the commanders of the militaries continued to use this old style of trench warfare, which was not conducive to the new weapons of the time, which resulted in the massive amounts of loss of life, which was about 4 million on the German side and about 5 million deaths on the Allied side. So to go into the barbed wire, throughout his poem, there's 3 lines right here that specifically speak to the barbed wire in the poem. So stuck out like many crowns of thorns. It's very interesting because he was actually a Jew, so to use a Christian reference, it's kind of odd to me. I'm not exactly sure why he did that. Maybe it was just because the majority of Brits were Christian, maybe it would kind of stick in their heads a little better, get the point across. Suspended, stopped, and held. This describes some of the dead and how they looked when they were in these barbed wire entrapments. Because I mean, you can see this is just kind of really terrible. So basically, what would happen is one side would decide one day that they want to mass assault, and they'll put thousands of people just climbing out of the trenches and running towards the other trench. And so they would hit this barbed wire, get all caught up, and then the artillery from the other side would be targeted on that area and just blow them up. The machine guns would be able to mow them down. And so you'd have just thousands of bodies stuck in the barbed wire. And so it was essentially to stay the flood of brutish men. So it was to keep the bad guys away from your trench. So that was the barbed wire. What I got from this poem from Rosenberg, basically his claim was that life is fragile. He saw thousands of deaths when he was ferrying the barbed wire up to the front lines. He couldn't get there with his cart without running over tons and tons of just dead bodies. And so he started to think, how easy it would have been for him to become one of those dead bodies, just in the blink of an eye. So these are some of the lines from the poem that I thought really kind of embodied his truth. So man's brain splattered on a stretcher bearer's face. It's kind of very, I don't know, gruesome in a way, because you think of, brains getting blown out, it's just there, and then to have them on somebody's face, that really just embodies how terrible things are getting. And then the drowning soul was sunk too deep for human tenderness. Basically, there were just so many dead bodies out there that there was no way to console. You can't really console a dead person, but as a human being, you kind of want to, just because they've been through tragedy. And then, as he was ferrying his barbed wire to and from, he said this specific case, we heard his weak scream, we heard his last sound, and it was basically of a man on the ground dying, just screaming out for help. And then none saw their spirit's shadow shake the grass or stood aside for the half used life to pass. So this one, I think, is the line of the poem. Basically, everything was over in an instant. Nobody got to think about it. And with 9 million deaths, every death just became a statistic. So no one really was able to get into a single death then and now, because they were just piling bodies on bodies on bodies. Any questions?